Hey guys, going to talk real quick about the pros and cons of a cashless society, and then specifically the privacy concerns associated with not having cash to use or to spend. So, first of all, what is a cashless society? It's eliminating all of the paper money we have to spend and replacing it with uh, something like credit cards or using something like cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, or something that Facebook proposed was Facebook Libra, which was another cryptocurrency that would have been controlled by Facebook. So, first of all, the pros of a cashless society is that it's really easy to use and you can use it everywhere. You can pay exact amounts. So, at the gas station, when they charge you that extra, 9/10 of a cent, you don't have to pay an extra dollar just because that's all you can give is like whole dollar amounts or even cents. And then another pro is that it's easier to track illegal activity and illegal transactions, um, which also could be a con depending on what business you're in. But it's easier to track these things, and it's easier to keep records of how people spend their money, which can be useful for those individuals if they want to have a better understanding of where their money's going, and what they're spending their money on. It's also more secure from things like theft, because if someone steals your wallet and there's $500 in there in cash, all they have to do is just take that money and then it's theirs to use. But with something, an alternative to cash, say something that's on your phone or, you know, based on your fingerprint or something like that, if someone steals your device with your money on it, you can easily, you know, deactivate that particular device, or like identification that they stole. And then if you're traveling, it's much easier to spend money because you don't have to exchange the currency you're using. You can simply just, you know, conduct the transaction, and the all the conversion and like currency exchange will take place in the back end, so you won't have to, you know, spend the extra time and pay fees for, you know, exchanging your money. And then finally, if we converted to a cashless society, there would likely be a reduction in things like fraud and tax evasion. Although there'd probably still be ways that people could get around these things. It becomes more difficult when there's a record of every transaction you make and everywhere your money's going. So if people are aware of that, they'll likely avoid making those decisions that would otherwise get them in trouble, if they were using cash and were able to go under the radar. And then next up are the cons. There's obviously big upsides to using cashless exchanges, and it's an efficient way of conducting transactions. But one of the biggest cons I see is the privacy and security implications of it. So, from a privacy perspective, if people want to spend money a certain way that other people may deem like immoral, or maybe not illegal, but just frowned upon, it kind of gives people the idea that they're being watched all the time, because the companies operating the cashless exchange or the government who may have access to how people are spending their money now, because they can actually track it. People can't spend their money as freely and might be less likely to spend money on things if they think it could harm their reputation if at some point that information was released sometime down the road. And then it also takes away people's freedom to spend even if it's illegal. So that just gives more power to centralized organizations like the government or large corporations, because if the government blocks a certain type of transaction, or the organization um, in charge of the currency is able to just block certain vendors or certain people from buying or selling, then that just gives those groups more control than they would have if you have cash as an alternative. And then anytime you convert something from the physical to the virtual, you introduce new security risks. So if someone were able to hack the currency system, they could potentially take down the entire economic system just by, cracking into a certain account or something and being able to steal money in ways that, don't even exist right now. And then finally, there's kind of the inequality issue of converting to something that's not cash. So right now, it's super easy for anyone to get cash. Like, just go to the bank or, go to the gas station and give the clerk $20 and get change for something. It's super easy. But when you introduce a new technology, inevitably some people aren't going to be able to afford the devices or whatever's required to use something like a cryptocurrency or whatever virtual currency may come up, 5-10 years from now. If they're unable to access the technology that they need, then they're not going to be able to access, the things they need to make transactions, to spend their money, and that ultimately would just leave them in a worse place than they are now if they're not able to get paid for the things they're doing or things like that. And then one last thing is if you're using something like biometrics, like your retinal scan or fingerprints for like your identifier to link to your bank accounts, the problem with that is if someone gains access to my fingerprint data or my retinal scan, it's not like you can just issue a new credit card number. You're stuck with having the same fingerprint. You can't really get your fingerprint changed. So that's just another concern that comes up when you're talking about biometrics in general and not just cryptocurrencies or virtual payment systems. So that's just another thing to think about. There's obviously pros and cons here, and I'm sure that the people putting these systems into place will take all of these into consideration when building the systems or the infrastructure necessary to move to a cashless society, if we do in fact make that move in the next decade or whenever that comes. So yeah, just think about those things and be aware of the privacy issues that may be associated with any of these moves. Thanks.